So welcome everyone. This is the presentation called the 4-Step Plan to get into BSMD programs, Harvard, and other top colleges. So the first thing is if you have a cell phone, just go ahead and silence it. And I also wanted to let you know we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So you're in the right place if you are smart, talented, and hardworking. But you're also anxious and confused about the college admissions process, which is completely normal, and you'd like a step-by-step plan on how to get into a top college. So why go to a top college? First of all, you'll get a world-class education. You will also have access to the university's powerful alumni network. So when you are looking for a job or moving to a new city, you can contact alumni from your university and they're more than happy to help you. You will also have the opportunity to interact with recruiters from Fortune 500 companies who will visit top colleges because they know that the students are smart and motivated and will be excellent at their company. So that's another nice benefit. And finally, and maybe most importantly, is you'll make lifelong friends and possibly even meet your future life partner. So these are just some of the reasons that students would like to go to a top college. So let's take a quick poll. What grade are you in? Like how many of you are in high school? How many in college? And if you're in high school, how many of you are rising seniors? I'm curious. Okay, so 7 are rising seniors. And how many other students are there in the room besides the 7 rising seniors? Nine others. Okay, great. Wonderful. That gives me an idea. So I just wanted to share a little bit about me in case you don't know me. I am a former Harvard interviewer and a Harvard graduate, and I was trained by Ivy League deans of admissions and how they make admissions decisions. I have a Master's of Arts in Education, and I'm a former Waldorf teacher, and also served on the Illinois Math and Science Academy Admissions Committee. I was also asked to be a judge for the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair, and my essay writing expertise was featured in Ed Mitsi's book on successful college essays. So my goal is to really get students as many admission letters as possible from top universities. I've gotten students into all these universities: Harvard, Stanford, Brown, Cornell, University of Pennsylvania, MIT, Northwestern, Dartmouth, University of Chicago, UC Berkeley. And there's nothing that makes me happier than talking with students at the end of the year who've gotten into these top universities and are so happy that they did. Especially when they've gotten into more than one and they can really choose where they want to go. It's a really, really happy feeling. I wanted to share this quote from George Bernard Shaw. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to thoroughly be used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. So I like this quote because it's really the key to a bright future. If you live your life in this attitude, you will be successful and happy no matter what you do or where you go to school. And it's very important to keep that in mind, that your life is much more than just college admissions or, you know, anything superficial like that. That there's a level of superficiality. So I want to give you both sides of the photo. I want to give you both sides of the picture here. I don't want to just involve you in a rat race that's going to be unhappy. So the class of 2022 acceptance rates came out a few months ago, and they were very, very low. Each year it just gets harder and harder. Stanford and Harvard around 4%. As you can see, Princeton, Columbia 5%, University of Chicago 7%, Northwestern 8%, Cornell 10%. And what you have to realize is in the age of the internet, it's becoming more and more challenging for universities to admit students because they're just flooded with applications. There's more than 36,000 high schools in the US. And I remember the dean of Stanford saying that 80% of applicants who apply to Stanford are qualified. It's just that they don't have enough seats. So it's a little bit of a lottery on some level, but not completely. So I tell my students, you know, do your best and reach for the stars, because whatever you do in terms of your high school career is going to be really important for you for the rest of your life. Even if you don't get into your dream school, you will probably still get into a very good university with a very good scholarship, or perhaps even an honors college. And you have to remember that success comes from within you, and it depends on your drive. It doesn't depend on the name of your university or anything like that. They did a study of 700 millionaires recently, and they found that the average GPA in high school of these millionaires was 2.9. So you definitely don't need good grades to be financially successful. It's really about motivation and drive. And it's also good to remember that you want to go to a good fit college, which means a college where you will thrive, not just that it has a good name brand. So for example, if I asked you, what's the best song out there in the world? Well, it's a silly question because, you know, what songs I will like will be different than what songs you will like. So there's no real answer to that question. And so there's also no real answer, what's the best university out there? It's really about fit. What will make you happy and help you thrive? I also have a special gift for you at the end, so I just wanted to let you know. If you stay till the end, you'll get a special gift. Now, the future job outlook. They did a study of 1,500 top executives in 60 countries. This was a study done by IBM, and what they found is that robots will be replacing 38% of jobs in the next 15 years. So if a robot can do something, then a person may not be necessary for that job. And what this means is that soft skills are more important and will be more valued in the future. So John Andrews, head of technology at PricewaterhouseCoopers, says that creative and critical thinking will be highly valued, as will emotional intelligence. And the dean of Harvard, William Fitzsimmons, says that students' intellectual imagination, strength of character, and their ability to exercise good judgment, these are critical factors in the admissions process. So the way that universities make decisions, it's called holistic evaluations. And these are some of the things that they're looking for in addition to good grades and test scores. They'll give you initially approximately a 15-minute read. And in that 15 minutes of reading your application, they want to understand who you are as a person. So it's like putting together a puzzle of who you are based on all these different factors related to college admissions. And we'll go through all of these one by one. But I've highlighted in green the GPA and standardized test scores like the SAT and the ACT, because these are the quantitative aspect of admissions. And then the rest of it is what I call the qualitative aspect, or personal qualities that come out in different ways through your resume, your essays, interviews, and so forth. Now, colleges use some format of rating students. In the world of Ivy League universities, which is a group of 8 universities that compete with each other athletically, they have something called an academic index, which they created to make sure that all the athletes at the universities had a minimum academic qualification. So the academic index is calculated by taking your SAT score, 3 SAT subject tests, your GPA, and your class rank, and coming up with a number on a scale of 1 to 240. And if you're an athlete, you have to have a minimum of 176. Now, I'm not saying that every university that's an Ivy League university participates and calculates the academic index. You know, there's different components of it, so it's not an exact formula. And if you didn't take an SAT subject test, they'll have their own way to recalculate that. But generally what they found is that Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, the average academic index is higher than students who attend Columbia or Cornell. Dartmouth, Brown, and Penn tend to be in the middle. So that just gives you a rough idea of how, you know, the numbers are calculated and where the universities rank. And it's interesting to note that the most common mistake people make is they just focus all their attention on SAT scores or getting perfect straight A's, grades at school. But you have to remember there is no formula. That's just one aspect, the academic index. Then after that, we're going to talk about additional ways that the applications are read. So it's interesting that the Stanford Alumni Magazine from 2013 had an article that said over the past 5 years, 69% of students with perfect SAT scores did not get into Stanford. So that's quite shocking. I have a lot of kids who come to me, they've got 1450 or 1510 on their SAT, and they want to know if they should still study more and more until they get a perfect score. And so that's a very interesting question, because it depends on the student, but sometimes that time can be better utilized helping the students stand out in other ways for their college application, demonstrating leadership or working on a special project, which we'll talk more about. So the other thing is that admissions officers rate students on personal qualities as well as their GPA and test scores. So with personal qualities, you want to know how you can stand out from the crowd. If you're solid but you don't stand out, you'll be ranked lower on the personal qualities. If you are diligent but not very creative, it's a little bit better, but still not as competitive as students who are high achievers, or the cream of the crop, those top students who love learning for its own sake. So that's very important to keep in mind. Personal qualities are determined by your recommendation letters, essays, resume, you know, interviews. They try to get as much of a sense of who you are as a person based on these things. So here's the case study. I've compiled here 4 students who want to go to Harvard, and let's pretend that you're on the Harvard admissions committee and you can only accept 1 student because you only have a seat for 1 student. Who would you choose? I've given you here the academic index of all these students, as well as their average SAT score. And we've also rated the essays here, you know, top 10%, top 1%, and so forth. And I've also put a little bit about their extracurricular activities and leadership and any special hardships. So take a few moments and decide who you would like to admit, and then Sarah, perhaps you could do a poll in the room and let me know what people say. So it looks like the majority voted for Mary. So that's interesting. Great. And that's actually who did get in. So you can see, just growing up Native American, she didn't have as many opportunities and she went through a lot of hardship and not a lot of support for her education, but she still rose to the top. So she really overcame a lot. And she was exceptionally qualified as well in terms of her academic index, SAT scores, essays, and showed a lot of leadership. Editor of the newspaper is quite impressive, captain of the debate and constitution teams, and president of a community service club. So she's got quite a lot going on there. I just want to point out a couple more things. You could definitely say that Trisha was not as academically qualified, even though she's a legacy and she might have had a little easier chance of getting in. Melanie, they show her as top 10% for academic index, but her essays are not as strong, and her SAT score definitely is not as strong as the other students. She definitely went through some hardship because she lives in Africa and her father is paralyzed. So that's definitely sad, and a lot of admissions officers would want to see if they could help her. And Steve was definitely in the running with Mary, but what they found in one of the recommendation letters that he got is that one of the teachers put down that Steve could sometimes be moody. And they had a student who attended Harvard just a few years ago, just like Steve, a math genius, and he decided he didn't want to come one day to the math team competition, and Harvard lost. So ever since then, because they had been dependent on him, they're very, very careful about the little things that they see in recommendation letters. So it tells you a little bit about how serious, people take the recommendation letters, the admissions officers. So today I'm going to teach you the 4 steps to get into a top university. Discover your genius is number 1. Number 2, explore deeply. Number 3, develop mastery. And number 4, showcase your strengths. Hopefully you will go through a process where your transformation will occur from stress and confusion to clarity and sense of vision for something greater and higher. I love this quote from one of the parents of a student of mine who got into Stanford. He said, as a parent, if you are ever going to invest in anything, this is it, your child's future. And what was amazing about this student is that she went to a school, a very good school in Illinois at Hinsdale, and the guidance counselor told her that she had no chance of getting into Stanford. So I worked with her. She came to me at the end of junior year. I worked with her over the summer on her college applications. She submitted a stellar application. We did a lot of hard work. And when it came down to it, she was admitted and she was overjoyed. And so I just remind students, don't listen to anybody who doesn't believe in you and your potential, because your potential is really unlimited. There's no one who cannot rise above the difficulties of their life. And most of you, I don't know all of you sitting in the room, but I'm guessing that most of you have had a lot of privilege in your life. And so you've already got a lot to start with, and there's a lot you can do. So just don't believe anyone who doesn't believe in you. And I love this quote from Arida. All of you are creative in one fashion or another. Each one of you is a genius at your service when you discover what your service is. You must discover your genius. So this is good because it reminds us that we already have innate talents that we can use in the service of others. And when we do that, creativity flourishes. But it's key here that we live our lives in the service of what's greater than our own little life. That's the key. Dedication to something higher and greater than yourself. Your community, the world at large, a vision for the future. This slide here just reminds me of a student of mine who was from Dubai, and she started an orphanage in India at the age of 15 from Dubai, which is quite amazing. So, you know, she would go there every year as part of her family vacations. But then she would go there just a little bit more when she started the orphanage. She still managed a lot of it from a distance, but it's quite amazing. She changed the life of so many young orphan girls and helped them by starting a school. So it just goes to show you that you can do anything at any age and there's no limitation. So let's talk about how you discover your genius. The first thing is to remember that if you're a well-rounded person, you will be happier, more successful, and more resilient in life. That's what they found, and that's one of the reasons they appreciate students who are well-rounded. So there's many types of intelligence, different possibilities and talents that you can explore and develop. There's musical intelligence, visual and spatial intelligence, which is aesthetics and art. There's kinesthetic intelligence, physical activity and movement. Interpersonal, how to get along with others and communicate effectively. Intrapersonal, to be sensitive to your own feelings and thoughts. Linguistic is reading, writing, communicating verbally. Logical intelligence is math and science, engineering, technology. And then the last but not least, naturalistic intelligence, which is being in tune with nature, understanding about the world of animals and plants and so forth. So let's take a quick poll and find out. I'm curious, I'd like to know, what type of intelligence do you want to develop further? I'm going to also just go back to that slide so you can see all the different types of intelligence. The theory of multiple intelligences was developed by Howard Gardner of the Harvard School of Education, and it's highly regarded in the world of education. Okay, intrapersonal this time? Okay, that's what the majority of you want to develop. That's very interesting because the group just from a few days ago wanted to develop interpersonal intelligence, which is how to communicate with others. And this group, your group, is wanting to develop intrapersonal intelligence. That's very interesting. So there's a lot of ways to do that. And I have several ways that I work with students. One of them is through an online class. And I go through the science of happiness, learning to be in tune with your thoughts and feelings, developing mindfulness, gratitude practices, all kinds of things that help you develop your intrapersonal intelligence. So that's really wonderful to hear. I also wanted to let you know that, this is a really good framework to kind of just develop a well-rounded life, the multiple intelligences. And it's a good starting point when you're trying to discover your genius as well, because you can try out different things and see what you feel comfortable with and where you excel. You can also just explore potential careers by looking at the different clubs available at your high school and seeing what you feel drawn to and then joining those clubs. Ninth grade is the best time to start exploring. So what I tell students is start in ninth grade, go to as many clubs as you feel attracted to, and then by the end of the year, choose a few clubs that you're going to stick with for the next 4 years. So make a decision to commit, because when you commit, you show that you have persistence, and you can also develop leadership when you commit. And instead of being a jack of all trades and master of none, which means you're in 20 clubs, but you don't develop leadership or depth in anything. By committing to a few clubs, you can really just manage something comfortably, and it will be a good stretch for you to do that versus an unhealthy or stressful kind of stretch where you get imbalanced. Last but not least, you have to be aware of something called tunnel vision, which is you just focus on a few things, maybe 1 or 2 areas, and you forget about the rest of life. So somebody who maybe, let's say, a math genius, and they're in math team, and they go to all the math competitions, but they don't have any other activities they're interested in. That's what they would call tunnel vision. That would not be a well-rounded student. So the ideal, student that they would want to take at a top university is someone who is well-rounded in general in all these different areas, but who also has 1 or 2 areas where they've gone very deep. So let's talk about this step, exploring deeply. The way to do that, there's a couple ways to do that. One of them is the law of underscheduling. This is from Cal Newport's book, How to Be a High School Superstar. So he's saying, pack your schedule with free time and use this time to explore. Meaning every day have some time where you basically just allow yourself to unwind and explore an area in greater depth. Not just sit around, playing video games or taking a nap. All of those may be fine, and there may be times and places for those, but time for you to actually explore in the area that you're really interested in. And then the law of focus, which is master one serious interest. Don't waste time on unrelated activities. That's also good to remember. One of the ways that you can cut down on your time is by learning good study skills and selecting the right high school classes so you don't get overwhelmed. And if you do those things, then you'll have more free time to explore. So that's part of what I do when I work with students. I help them develop their 4-year plan of what high school classes to take, so they don't take too many. Some kids these days are just loading up on AP classes, unnecessarily, because after a certain point, it doesn't bring you the value. It's not going to help your chances of admission after a certain point. So you could better use that time that you would be using for homework and studying on exploring something in more detail. Study skills, again, can cut short your time doing homework or preparing for exams. I also love this quote by Mark Twain: "Never let school get in the way of an education." So you're going to have to look beyond school for exploring, because school will give you generally a very formulaic or textbook approach to studying something, and you really want to go beyond that. And some of the ways that you can do that are just reading books on your own, books especially related to the field that you're interested in exploring, and then watching videos. You can watch lots of free videos on YouTube these days. You can also take classes from top universities, actually, through edX and Coursera. I'm taking a class right now from UC Berkeley called The Science of Happiness, and it's an excellent class that I'm sharing with my students as well. So, if you're a lifelong learner and you want to learn from these top universities, there's really nothing better than learning on your own. And part of that involves finding a mentor or a coach who can guide you along the way in your area of interest. And again, the one more thing I wanted to just keep in mind for everyone is make sure there's a balance. You don't want to have all free time where you're just doing whatever you want. There has to be some structure there too. So you want to have time for your homework, taking care of yourself, getting good sleep. I had one student who had poor grades and he was playing a lot of video games. So I worked with him. I wanted to know what he was doing every hour of his day. And then we looked at a schedule and changed it. And he actually followed through. He started exercising more, socializing more with his friends. His grades started to improve. And he ended up getting a full ride at a university in Florida to study music, which was his passion. So the signs of balance are important to keep in mind for yourself. Are you healthy? Are you relaxed? Are you creative? Are you inspired? Are you in the zone? Are you in what they call the flow state? So flow state or in the zone, you've probably heard from athletics. It's when you lose um, everything else and you're just fully concentrated on something and you're enjoying it so much. You're in this space of real creativity, and it's like that's the state where genius really comes through. You know, the ancient Greeks and Romans, they had this idea of the muses who would come to you when you were in a state of openness. And if you were open to receiving help, open to genius. So that's why I have this photograph here, because they understood that there was something about living your life in that state of openness that was very essential to creativity and the higher arts like music and so forth. And you know, this, I hope you're getting the feeling that that's that's exactly what admissions officers are looking for. That's the way to stand apart, is really by showing creativity and being in that zone where most students are not, because they're overwhelmed with classes and homework. So if you can find a way to do this, you know, you'll be really standing out from the crowd. So let's just take a quick poll. I'm curious if you feel like you have free time to explore each day. Half and half. Okay. So some people do, but others disagree. Okay. So that's good. It's just good to reflect on that and to know that maybe it's necessary to make some changes in your schedule. And these days, you know, just because of technology, you can see this girl on the iPhone here. Um, we are so bombarded day in and day out with emails and text messages, cell phones. We're just bombarded in every way possible. So your attention gets drawn in 100 different directions, sometimes within 1 hour. And it's really important that you remember you have to be proactive and make the time. If you don't have free time, you have to schedule that into your day and don't let anyone touch it. So it's very hard these days to do that. I have to agree, and I sympathize with all of you, and I go through the same hardship myself. So even today, somebody was asking me to come over and you know, be with them. They're doing an educational retreat program that I would love to be part of, but I know that if I did that, I would have to give up. I would have to give up my 1 hour of meditation in the evenings that I do every day, and I had to say no. I was very drawn to wanting to go, but I know that when I have a stable meditation practice in the mornings and evenings, I feel happier, I'm calmer, and I feel like I'm in that zone where there's creativity and openness. And so it's really hard sometimes to say no because there's so many good things out there to do. And if you're smart and gifted, you're going to have that desire to explore and help. But you have to really take care of yourself. And these days it's just so hard to do. So I can sympathize with everyone on that. Step 3 is to actually develop mastery. Once you've discovered your genius and you've started to explore, it's now time to really develop mastery in that area by taking it seriously, taking classes, really showcasing your strengths that you'll be doing later. You'll be showcasing your strengths later, but to really develop mastery, when you think about a college, they talk about building a class. So they want students to work together and to produce something beautiful on a college campus, the community that's there. When you have diversity, when you have students who play different instruments, you can have a beautiful orchestra and concerts. But if everyone played the violin, you couldn't do that. So they're really looking for diversity and students who are really good in certain areas. So they would rather have someone who's a master violinist and then choose someone who's a master singer or a master piano player and have a combination. So you never know what exactly a college is looking for, but they are looking for students who develop mastery. And one of the ways to do that is to do a special project. These days in school, I find that a lot of students don't actually write long papers in history or English anymore like they did 20 years ago. There's just not a lot of teachers who are doing that anymore, partly because they're overwhelmed and they have so much to do. Sometimes in AP classes or IB classes, there's special projects that you can do. But if not, if your school doesn't offer anything like that, you should take things into your own hands and make sure that you do that. So we'll talk about two different kinds of competitions that show your mastery. And winning awards is always nice because it shows the admissions people that you have mastered something. Obviously, international or national level awards are more impressive than just local or school level awards. But again, if you haven't won an award, there's still other things you can do, like special projects, to show your mastery and interest. So there's one competition that you can participate in if you are a STEM person interested in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. And again, the point is not winning the award, but what it takes to even be able to enter such a competition will grow you as a person amazingly. So I talked to the deans of Ivy League universities about this competition, and their eyes would just light up because who wouldn't want a budding scientist at their university? The universities get millions of dollars of funding for research. And so if there's a student who is going to be an excellent scientist and help them win grants and funding, they're going to want that student at their university. And what they told me is that some of them actually look in January when the list of the top 300 winners come out. This is top 300 winners in the United States who have entered this competition, and they are leading edge scientists. And if any of those students applied to their university, they'll immediately flag the application, and that student will have a much higher chance of getting in. So I had two students who came to me this summer after junior year. One of them had no special extracurriculars, so I helped him by encouraging him to do a project, which he did by finding a long-distance mentor in LA. And he didn't win the competition, but he got an honorable mention, which is excellent. He's attending UC Berkeley now. I had another student who had done some research on reusing toxic waste in Korea. And he didn't want to continue with the project, but I encouraged him to do that. And he eventually published his research in the American Chemical Society Journal. He actually did win. He was one of the top 300 students, and he's now attending Stanford. Now, if you're not interested in STEM, but you have an interest in the humanities, there's a journal called the Concord Review, which is very impressive. So there's, high school student research articles published in this journal. There are topics ranging from emergency rule in India to occupation of Japan and the Cuban Revolution. So if you have an interest, I would definitely suggest that you look into this as a possibility. I have a photo here that reminds me of a student of mine who did a research paper on World War II, people who resisted the Nazi invasion in Poland. And he wrote an excellent, very heart-moving research paper about these people. And he learned so much, and it grew him so much as a person that summer. It was quite incredible to witness his journey. And, he was one of those people, he ended up not getting published in the Concord Review, but that's okay because he just learned so much and he got an amazing recommendation letter from his mentor. Oh, and of course he got into a good university. He got into Northwestern. Eventually he decided not to go there because it wasn't a good fit for him, even though his father really wanted him to go there. So I was just impressed with him taking a stand on what he really wanted in life. There's an award here called the Congressional Award, and this is an award anyone can win. It's non-competitive, so you just set goals for yourself in public service, personal development, physical fitness, and expedition or special project. And whatever hours you accumulate towards those goals will count so that you have different levels of awards that you can win. Now, if you haven't done a special project or won an award, you can still show mastery and special talent and leadership by actually positively contributing to a club instead of just holding a title like president, but actually doing something, taking initiative, making a change in your organization or school or community. That's very impressive. And then, of course, writing about that in your essay for college. You can also demonstrate teamwork, which is highly valued these days because we live in a global world where people are communicating with people who are very different from them and working together and cooperating. Learning teamwork skills is very impressive. And so is teaching others. So, if you help your fellow students by being a peer tutor, they're going to figure that you're going to do the same thing at the university when you get there. And there's nothing better than other students helping each other. If you think about it, you could take calculus at Harvard or you take calculus at a community college. And really 90% of it is going to be the same thing, if not more. But it's really, so on some level, yes, the courses can be different for sure, but a lot of the courses can just be very similar at a university that's an Ivy League versus a community college. So what are you really paying for when you are spending the, thousands of dollars on that education? What you're paying for is the community of peers that you're around, because you learn more from other students than you would learn even from the teachers. The teachers are so busy, you often don't get time to spend one-on-one with teachers. So helping others, teaching them is very valuable. And then finally, the last step is, now that you have all these talents and projects you've done, is to actually showcase your strengths. And this is where I can help students. This is, out of all the steps, this is sometimes just the easiest step. I work with students who come to me this summer before senior year, and I help them with their college essays and applications by helping them showcase what they've done. So part of that involves deciding what standardized tests to submit to colleges, considering superscoring and score choice in detail. Generally, a 740 or higher is a good SAT score, and a 34 or higher is considered competitive. These are for Ivy League universities. You also will have to write lots of essays. And this is what I spend the most time on with students, 20 to 40 essays for top colleges often. Sometimes you can recycle them and sometimes you can't. But with each university, you want to show them three things. You want to show them your head, which is your intellectual curiosity. So this student of mine, I'm sorry, not the student, this photo reminds me of a student of mine who was a figure skating champion, and she wrote an essay on the physics of figure skating, and that got her into Stanford. You also want to show, will you be a good roommate? You want to show your heart. I remember the dean of Harvard saying very clearly, that's what he looks for in a personal statement. And this is very important because there's so much stress these days. I'm sure you all can appreciate that. And I think that when you can be a good person and be there to support others, that's just so valuable. It's really amazing. So, you know, there's so much anxiety and depression these days at college campuses, especially the first year, because that's the hardest. When you're just going to someplace new, you don't know anybody, it's a really big deal. And to be able to be there for your roommate and be a good person is very wonderful. And it's really something they're looking for in the essay. And then there's often a third type of question that comes in handy where you can talk about your community service. And they ask, how have you contributed to your community? Or what community do you belong to? And that's what they're looking for, people who are making the world a better place. I love this quote from St. Francis of Assisi. He who works with his hand is a laborer. He who works with his hands and his head is a craftsman. He who works with his hands and his head and his heart is an artist. So if you live your life as an artist, you know, that's just beautiful. And that's what you want to show in these applications. And how do you show it? Well, the essays are definitely one place. You also show it through your resume. I have a special format that I use to help students write up a resume that's easy for admissions officers to read. And though they're not required, they're very, very useful, and a lot of high-achieving students submit resumes. You can also submit a supplement. So generally, a liberal arts school can give you the option of submitting a music or art or research abstract, music or art supplement. And so if you have a talent in that area, I'd say definitely submit your supplement. It can't hurt you. Supplements are required for specialty schools, which means if you're applying to, let's say, an architecture program, they would like to see your portfolio of what you've done so far. And in case they like your work, they'll flag your application. So let's say here the statistic shows that at Harvard about 20% of music supplements were exceptional. And if there's a, if you're flagged as an exceptional student, you have a 61% chance of admission versus the regular 4%. So that's quite amazing. What they look for in recommendation letters is the student the driving force behind class discussions, or are they just diligent? Will the student shake things up on campus or blindly follow the lead of others? And the college list is also very important. These days, what used to be considered safety schools cannot be considered safety schools anymore because people are getting wind of the fact that colleges really do manipulate their admissions letters so that they get a higher yield rate. So if they give out a yield rate of 70, if they give out 100 admission letters, 70 people come to their school, that's a 70% yield rate. If they give out 100 admission letters and only 50 people come to the school, then that's a 50% yield rate. And the higher the yield rate, the higher the ranking on US News and World Report. So they really don't want to admit you if they think you're using them as a safety school. And I've had that happen to a few students. So you have to make sure you have a good balance. And I help students make sure they have a good balance of safety, reach, and target schools. Interviews are also very important. They're optional usually, but if you have the chance, they can really make or break your case because the interviewer will put in a small paragraph that is taken seriously by the admissions committee. Okay, demonstrated interest is when you visit a college and you sit in on classes or you talk to a professor or talk to a college representative, it shows your seriousness about that college. And a lot of schools these days are tracking this information on their systems, so they know that you've actually visited campus and you're more likely to attend since you've been there and you've shown some seriousness. Because everyone can easily apply to so many schools with a click of a button, this really gives them a sense of whether you're serious or not. Finally, evaluating acceptance letters is an important part. Don't just jump at the first university that accepts you. You have the ability to potentially negotiate more financial aid. A few years ago, I helped a student of mine negotiate $16,000 more financial aid from the University of Pennsylvania. So it's definitely a possibility. So let's remember why you showed up today. You are smart, talented, and hardworking, but you're anxious and confused about the admissions process, and you just want to be told what to do and how to do it. So before we launch in for the end part of this webinar, I'm just going to spend a few moments here on BSMD programs because I know a lot of you are interested in medicine. So there's more than 120 programs out there with admission rates between 1% to 8%. So you can see they're even more competitive than Ivy Leagues potentially. The deadlines are usually early in the fall, in the month of November. And the benefit of getting into one of these programs is basically less stress. You can maintain, if you maintain your GPA at around a 3.5, for example, you'll be fine. Versus if you went the regular pre-med route, you would really have to work hard for the highest possible GPA. Similarly, a lot of these programs either don't require that you take the MCAT or they allow you to get in, allow you to continue the program with a lower MCAT score. But again, you don't have to strive and do, go through that whole process where you're really trying to get the highest MCAT score. So it's a lot less stress for students, and it certainly doesn't hurt to apply. There's also an additional option, which is BSDO program, Doctor of Osteopathy. And then there's also the Caribbean route. But I've heard that the pass rate and dropout rate there can be concerning, so be careful. One thing to keep in mind is, although these programs are not binding per se, if you decide you want to apply to another medical school, you will usually lose your guaranteed spot. So, it's got its ups and downs in that way. So what are BSMD programs looking for? Well, the first thing that they're looking for is students with a really high GPA in high school. Basically an unweighted GPA of approximately 3.8 or above. Students who would have taken 6 to 8 AP classes by the end of senior year. The average SAT score is between 1400 to 1500, and the average ACT score is between 30 and 34. Also, 1/3 of the programs require SAT subject tests. Usually what they would require are math level 2 and chemistry, sometimes biology, and of course each program is different, so you really do have to check with what they want. They also like students to have a year of chemistry, biology, physics, and calculus. And they like it if you take as many science classes as you can. But anatomy and physiology is not expected, even if it's offered at your school, because they know you're going to do a higher level class when you get to university. Now, some of the signs that they look for that you're serious about medicine is that you've spent, regular time volunteering at a hospital or a nursing home and you've actually had patient contact. And they want students who have done that for about 2 years. If you haven't, it's not the end of the world, but to show that you know what it's like working with patients is very important. They also like students who have done at least a minimum of 1 summer of research in biology or chemistry. And there's different types of research you can do: group research, individual research, and certainly individual research is more valued than just group research. They also want students who have shadowed a doctor for a minimum of 40 to 60 hours of observation, so you know what the life of a physician is like. And they're also looking for leadership and maturity, which come across through recommendation letters and essays. Now, BSMD programs offer interviews to select students, usually between January and March. And 25% of the students who are interviewed get in. So, preparing for interviews is very important as well. So hopefully I've created some order out of the chaos and you have some idea of how college admissions works. Now you have 2 options. Of course, I like to say there's the complicated way and then the simple way, step-by-step way. So if you work with someone like myself who's got a successful track record of students getting into top colleges, I have a 90% success rate if the student is qualified. And I work with a limited number of students on private coaching each year. So if you have that ability, definitely give me a call or email me at mail@ivyleaguepotential.com. And I can help you in the admissions process, starting as early as 8th grade, because the earlier you start, the more you can plan. But if private coaching is not an option for you, I also have an online class, A to Z, that tells you everything about college admissions through 15 hours of audios, videos, 30 pages of cheat sheets, and it's 100% online, so you work at your own pace. You can watch a video on creating your resume, and then you can get a sample resume that you can use as a template to create your own. I've also interviewed several other experts in college admissions, more than 20, who've been featured in top media outlets. So you're not just getting wisdom from myself, but from all these different experts as well. Now there's 15 aspects to the online class. Everything that we talked about throughout this webinar is reviewed in detail in the online class, including planning your summer and interview preparation, recommendation letters, how to get the best letters, how to prepare for tests, essays, resume, everything you can think of. In addition to the videos and audios that are online, every 2 weeks I get on a group call with students and we study something so that we're inspired. Right now I'm helping students on the science of happiness, so we're learning about that. And then there's also Q&A session where you can just ask me anything related to college admissions that you're interested in. So that's just ongoing every 2 weeks. And that's part of the online class. Oh, today I wanted to offer everyone who's here a gift, which is $100 off of any tutoring package. So if you would like to work with a tutor, I have highly qualified tutors who have worked for the Princeton Review and Kaplan, and who have helped develop material for those companies, and also tutors who have actually graded the essays for the SAT and ACT. So, like I said, there's 2 options if you'd like to just learn about working with me. One is the online class, and you can find more information there at ivyleaguepotential.com/roadmap. And then the second is private coaching. And you can just email me or call me if you'd like to learn more about that. And I'm going to open it up now to questions. So I see that we have a question here. when I talked about the 740, you're wondering if it's the 740 on the SAT or the SAT subject test. So yeah, that's a 740 on the SAT subject tests, and also like the SAT, the math portion, and then the verbal portion. So there's two portions there on the SAT. So it'd be 740 for the math and 740 for verbal. They're separate. Okay, another question here. We just want to clarify. I'm not sure what the question is. I'll wait for you to type it in. Oh, yeah, okay. So what is the competitive score for the SAT? Yeah, so a competitive score for the SAT, let's say, is 1480 or above for an Ivy League university. But again, it's not a hard and fast rule because the admissions decisions are based not just on numbers, but as you can see, many more factors. And so if you're a little bit below or a little bit above, you know, that's perfectly fine. And the SAT subject test 740 is a good score. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, here's another question. Is there any difference in equivalent scores for the SAT or ACT? No, there's no difference. You can take either one, and all colleges will accept either one now. There's also some recent changes the past few months. Stanford and Princeton just recently announced they're not going to require the writing portion of the SAT or the ACT, which they did require before. There's no difference, and also it's good to take a baseline and just see which test you do better on. So I always tell my students take both tests and then decide which one you want to focus your attention on. Because if you do better on one, then you can just focus all your study habits and time on that test. Okay, yeah, I see here. Yeah, you gave an example, 1560 versus 35. Yeah, there's no difference per se. I mean, there's just a few minor differences between the SAT and the ACT, as you know. The ACT has trigonometry on it and has a science section, which the SAT does not. So otherwise, they're pretty much very similar. Here's another question. Does it matter what school you go to for a pre-med track? Prestigious versus state school? No, that's a good question. I think there is some difference that it does make, but you have to look into the school in particular that you're talking about. Because sometimes when you go to a school where everyone's really smart, it's harder to stand out and get to the top of the class. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You have to see what opportunities are there at the school for you, because some universities will really help students in the pre-med track and others don't. And then also you have to look at the track record for the school itself to see, you know, let's say how many of their students who are pre-med, what percentage go on to medical school. And then you could even potentially get detailed information as to what schools they go to. I think that would be something that you could ask the Career Center. That kind of statistic you can ask the Career Center at the university to see what they'll give you. But that's the kind of in-depth level of research. If you really are serious about comparing schools, that's what you can do. It's not easy to find this information on the internet. Definitely not. So the more time you spend on college admissions and researching colleges and asking these types of questions, the more informed you'll be about, where you're exactly going to school. And also talk to students, especially juniors or seniors at the university who are in the pre-med track, or who might have just gotten into medical school or something like that, because they'll know the inside scoop about that university that you won't get on the brochures or websites. Okay, and here's another question. Have you worked with college students looking to apply to med school? To what extent? I've worked with a few students, not a whole lot, but it's something I am looking to do more. But she definitely got into medical school, and the process is so similar. It's uncanny, really. Everything that I just talked to you about in terms of the BSMD programs, that's very important. Of course, the MCAT is different. University classes are different, but otherwise they're looking for students with research experience, students who have spent time in a hospital, interacting with patients and shadowed doctors, shown leadership and maturity. All those things are the same. So I have worked with a few students when they've applied to medical school, but generally I've worked with high school students and had good success with students getting them into BSMD programs. Any other questions? Okay. If you apply to a school and you're applying saying that you're going to study for a major that's rare, to improve your chances of getting in? Yeah, that's possible, definitely. Like, let's say, for example, there's a university where they have an ancient Greek department. There's not a lot of students who would want to study ancient Greece, about ancient Greece, or learn Greek or anything like that. So if you have a interest in that, you can't just put that down just because you want to. I mean, you can, but they might be suspicious. But if you've actually, for example, taken Latin in school and really enjoyed it and you're excelling at it, they might believe you more that yes, you're going to actually study ancient Greece. So yeah, that could make a difference, definitely. But they also know students change their minds, so they're not going to hold it to you that you have to stick by it once you attend the university. It's a good question. I've gotten that one a lot. And it also depends, of course, if they have a limited number of seats or not in that program. So some public universities have cut off for students who can get into the computer science program or the engineering program, and they have to decide exactly what they want when they're applying to university. So that's why it helps to do all this ahead of time as much as possible, the research, so that especially with engineering colleges, you have to make a lot of decisions earlier. With liberal arts schools, you have time to consider things. Any other questions? No further questions. Okay, well, wonderful. It was wonderful to talk with you all. I look forward to staying in touch. And oh, Sarah, I had a quick question for you. You had sent